Good morning at Year 3 and welcome to today's reading video where we're going to be answering inference questions on Earth's Changing Mountains, which is our non-fiction information text. So let me share it with you so that you can see exactly what we are going to be doing. And let's start it from the beginning. So, as I said, we're going to be answering inference questions on Earth's Changing Mountains. Your first activity is to match the clauses together. On one side you have a clause, on another side you have the rest of the sentence, so another clause, and you need to match them together so that the sentences make sense. I'm going to read you all the clauses on this side, and then I'm going to read you all the clauses on this side, then you're going to pause the video and match them up correctly. I couldn't believe my eyes. I've travelled across many different continents. The Eiffel Tower, located in Paris, attracts a lot of tourism. Hot molten lava was erupting from Mount Vesuvius, but I've never visited Antarctica. Pause the video so that you can match the clauses, the first three clauses together. Okay, great. Let's have a look and see if you were correct. I couldn't believe my eyes. Hot molten lava was erupting from Mount Vesuvius. I've travelled across many different continents, but I've never visited Antarctica. And lastly, the Eiffel Tower, located in Paris, attracts a lot of tourism. Let's go on to the next set of sentences. Mountains, earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. I don't know what to paint, cried Lucy in frustration. Martin skied down the white snowy slopes. And you need to match them with the clauses on the other side. Why don't you paint a watercolour landscape, suggested the teacher, after reaching the peak of Mount Blanc and are caused by the movement of tectonic plates. What you need to do is just pause the video so that you can work that out. Let me just underline peak because that is also one of our keywords. Fantastic. Pause the video and match the correct sentences together. Okay, mountains, earthquakes and volcanic eruptions are all caused by the movement of tectonic plates. I don't know what to paint, cried Lucy in frustration. Why don't you paint a watercolour landscape, suggested the teacher. And Martin skied down the white snowy slopes after reaching the peak of Mount Blanc. Fantastic. We are going to read this text again. And I'm going to read certain parts, then I'm going to get you to read certain parts. Starting off, I am going to get you to actually start off. So what are mountains? Can you read from here all the way to here? Off you go. Play the video once you've done that. So pause it now and then play it once you've read that bit. Okay, let's continue with my laser pen. And I'm going to read this next part by myself. All mountains are part of Earth's surface that stand high above their surroundings. Similar rises are usually called hills. Some mountains are very steep and form high pointed peaks. Others have a more rounded shape, though the top of these mountains may be just as high. I'm going to continue. A mountain may be a single peak, but mountains are often joined together in a mountain range. Some ranges have hundreds of separate peaks. When ranges are grouped together, they are sometimes called a mountain chain. Let's get you to read this, to join in with me as you're reading this. At 1,917 meters, Mount Washington is the highest peak in New Hampshire, USA, United States of America. This mountain is in the Presidential Range, which forms part of the larger White Mountains chain. They both belong to a mountain system called the Appalachians. Turn over to page 5. And I'm going to read, you're going to read up from World of Mountains all the way to land. Okay, pause the video and play it once you've done that. This world map shows the location of the 10 longest mountain ranges. The longest of all, the Andes, stretches for 7,200 kilometers, which is 4,470 miles, down the whole of South America. Its peaks form parts of 7 different countries. Wow. And you can see the Andes all the way here, and it spans across 7 different countries. Let's read Looking at Mountains together. Mountains are formed in different ways and are shaped by wind and weather. There are many different kinds of mountains, including explosive volcanoes, which can cause major changes in the surrounding landscape. People live on, use, and change mountains as well. In recent years, industry and tourism have had a great effect on many of the world's mountain ranges. In some places, this has brought problems. Let's turn over to page 6. Mountains is called How Are Mountains Formed? So what I would like you to do is let's read this first bit. I'm going to read this first bit by myself, and then you're going to read this bit by yourself. Mountains are formed over long periods of time by the movement of rocks beneath the Earth's surface. This surface is part of our planet's rocky outer layer, which is called the Earth's crust. The crust is not one continuous layer like the shell of an egg, but is broken into several huge pieces. We call these pieces tectonic plates. I hope you spotted one of our key words, tectonic plates. And I would like you to read Jigsaw of Plates by yourself, please. So read from all the way here to Earth's surface here, and play the video once you've done that. Great work for reading by yourself. Let's read this next part together, and it's quite a long paragraph, so make sure you're following it with your reading fingers. Volcanoes. Beneath Earth's crust, there is a thick layer called the mantle. The rocks here are so hot that some of them have melted, making them runny like sticky toffee. Delicious. In some places where one plate is forced beneath another, the hot molten rock forces its way through a crack in the Earth's surface and forms an erupting volcano. Once it is on the surface, the molten rock cools and hardens again. If this goes on happening at the same spot for thousands of years, the rocks build up to form a volcanic cone or a mountain. When a volcano has not erupted for many years, it is said to be dormant or sleeping. After thousands of years, it may be called extinct or dead, but the mountains formed by these volcanoes still remain. This is an active smoking volcano, lies on the Aleutian Islands of Alaska, USA. The islands are part of the Ring of Fire, which is on page 7, our last page. So let's turn over and read page 7. And we are going to read this part together, and then you are going to read this part by yourself. There are a lot of volcanoes around the edge of the Pacific Ocean. This circle of tectonic plate boundaries around the Pacific is called the Ring of Fire. And you can see it here. Actually, if you were to move the continents about, so if you were to move these continents and put them over here, you would see that the ring would go, it would actually form a ring like that. But obviously the way the map has been set out, you can't actually see it as a ring. But if you want to Google it, you can Google Ring of Fire and see what it looks like. Throughout this whole area, erupting volcanoes change the landscape. In 1980, for example, a volcano in the Cascade Range in Washington State, USA erupted. A huge explosion blew 400 meters off the top of Mount St. Helens. The surrounding area was covered in volcanic ash and rock. Before that day, Mount St. Helens hadn't been dormant for 123 years, so a very long time. Now you're going to read this last part by yourself, and then you are going to play the video once you've done that. So I'm going to give you a chance to read from here all the way down to here. Pause the video, oopsie daisy, pause the video once you've done that, and then you can play it again. Fantastic, you have read the text. So what I'm going to do now is go through how to answer inference questions. Inference questions require you to read the text for clues and pair it with your own knowledge to find the answer. The answers are not explicitly stated in the text. You have to read around it and combine it with your own knowledge. And the steps to success for finding this are underlining the keywords in the question, reading the text and looking for clues, pairing the clues with your own knowledge, and then answering the question in full sentences. So just pause the video so that you can have a think of how you're going to answer these inference questions. Fantastic. Now what we're going to do now is I'm going to model going through one inference question to show you exactly how I want you to answer it. So let me reshare my screen again. Okay. I'm just going to move my mouse and computer. So those were our literal, and now we are doing inference. I'm going to leave that here so that you can refer back to that for this as we're answering these questions. So I'm going to follow these steps to answer this question. The question says, how can volcanoes change the surrounding landscape? How can volcanoes change the surrounding landscape? So we're talking about volcanoes, and I'm looking for how they change landscape. So how do volcanoes change the surrounding landscapes? I've underlined the keywords in the question. Now I need to read the text and look for clues. So I'm going to get my text. I'm going to get my text ready. And I am going to, the answer is on page 5, just so you know, by the way. I always forget to write it down. But yes, I'm going to look at page 5 and have a read of it and see how volcanoes can change the surrounding landscapes. Now remember, the answer might not be explicit, so it might not be explicitly stated in the text, but there might be clues. So it says mountains are formed in different ways and are shaped by wind and weather. Though there are many different kinds of mountains, including explosive volcanoes, which can cause major changes in the surrounding landscape. Now, it doesn't explicitly tell me the answer there, but it does tell me clues. It talks about the volcanoes being explosive. Now, I'm actually also going to read on to this next part about volcanoes, so it can also help me. So we've talked about the thick layer called mantle. In some places where one plate is formed beneath the other, hot molten rock forces its way through a crack in the Earth's crust and forms an erupting volcano. Once it is on the surface, the molten rock cools and hardens again. If this goes on happening for many years, the rocks can build up to form a volcanic cone. So, in the question which says, how can volcanoes change the surrounding landscape? I'm going to firstly use my knowledge that it says once volcanoes erupt, the hot molten lava cools down and hardens, and when this keeps happening, it builds up and up and up until it forms a volcano. So already, volcanoes change the landscape because they, the volcano in itself is a change in landscape because it's constantly erupting lava, which cools down and hardens and forms extra layers. But also, knowing my knowledge of volcanoes, when they explode, the lava or the molten rock destroys the things that are around it. So I'm going to combine my knowledge. So I've read the text and looked for clues, and now I'm pairing it with my own knowledge, and I'm going to answer it in a full sentence. So the full sentence, it starts off by saying, how can volcanoes change the surrounding landscape? Just to start off my sentence and make that into a full sentence by using the same words in the question, I'm going to say volcanoes can change the surrounding landscapes. And then I can finish the rest of my sentence off. So, capital letter at the start of my sentence. Volcanoes can change the surrounding landscapes by, and I'm going to finish it off by referring back to my text. So how can volcanoes change the surrounding landscapes? Well, over thousands of years, when the molten rock cools down and hardens again, it can build a volcanic cone. So volcanoes can change the surrounding landscapes by erupting and I'm going to say by erupting hot molten rock. Hot, and because this is an expanded noun phrase, it needs a comma. Hot molten rock which then cools and hardens over a long period of time. This can form a volcanic cone. Okay. If I wanted to, I could actually make my answer longer and also talk about how I know, erupting volcanoes, the hot molten lava, is destructive to the landscape around it. Okay, it can destroy the vegetation, plants, trees, any towns that are nearby. So I could also talk about that if I wanted to, but this is the answer I've done. So now what I'm going to do is just read it back to myself and make sure it makes sense. Volcanoes can change the surrounding landscapes by erupting hot molten rock, which then cools and hardens. Over a long period of time, this can form a volcanic cone. Okay, so that's how it's changing the landscape. So that's exactly what I want you to be doing. I want you to be answering in full sentences using clues from the text. So let me stop sharing my screen and go back to our slides. Okay, so really follow the steps to success. Underline the keywords in the question, read the text and look for clues, pair the clues with your own knowledge and then answer in full sentences. Question number 1. Why do you think the daring climbers are clinging to the sides of the mountains? Question 2. The text describes some mountains as grassy slopes or covered in colourful flowers. What do you think the Transantarctic mountain range in Antarctica looks like? My apologies, I have forgotten to put the page numbers on this. So for here, you need to look at page number 5. For the Transantarctic, you need to look at, sorry, here is page number 4. And here you need to look at page number 5. My apologies, I've forgotten to put it on. Let me just erase that. Okay, so pause the video so that you can answer those questions. Question 3, what kind of problems could tourism have on mountain environments? What kind of problems could tourism have on mountain environments? And you can find the answer to that on page 5. And question 4, do you think it would be safe to live near a dormant volcano? Explain your answer. So do you think it would be safe to live near a dormant volcano? Explain your answer. You can find the answer on page 6. Okay. And then your challenge is to write a descriptive account about climbing Mount Everest. Very exciting. Pause the video so you can do those now. Okay, here are the answers to the question. Why do you think the daring climbers are clinging to the sides of the mountains? The daring mountain climbers are clinging to the sides of the mountain so that they do not fall off. The text describes question 2. The text describes some mountains as grassy slopes or covered in colourful flowers. What do you think the Transantarctic mountain range in Antarctica looks like? I think the Transantarctic mountain range would be covered in ice and snow. He may have also used words like white, icy, snowy, cold. Okay, so question number 3, what kinds of problems could tourism have on mountain environments? This is a bit subjective, but I have the main problem. Many tourists litter and dump their equipment on the mountains, and this negatively impacts the environment. So you had to use your own knowledge of what you think could happen whilst people are climbing mountains. What problems could arise? Question 4, do you think it would be safer to live near a dormant volcano? Do you think it would be safe to live near a dormant volcano? Explain your answer. I said I do not think it's safe to live next to a dormant volcano as it has the potential to erupt at any given moment. Okay, so you can pause the video and check through your answers. Make sure you go through them and then you can upload them onto Seesaw for your teachers to see. Okay, now that is it. Let's discard that. So, as I said, upload your upload your work onto Seesaw so your teachers can mark it, and I will see you in tomorrow's lesson. Bye, Year 3.